Their voices truly matter, and their views of our teaching practices that's what your school is all about.
Yes, it is. I think there's a lot of factors. I think both Connie and Rudy hit on a few good points. First of all, I think it's important to review other school systems, to look at these other countries and what makes them successful, but we also have to remember that all countries are different, and Rudy touched on our history and where we come from and what's that about. You know, ideally, you know, it'd be a perfect world if we could say, here's an educational system, you know, that's going to work across the boards, right, for everybody. But the reality is that can't happen because we're all so different. I mean, America is so different from other countries. China is different, India is different. So I think what we have to do is pull from those resources and pull out what makes it work, what's successful there, and how can we take that and maybe incorporate it into our system that works for our culture.
In a certain sense, we've got in some ways, a harder job than some, let's say, Scandinavian countries, because we had a factory model of education that went along with the kind of workforce that was needed in the 20th century and certainly in the 19th and for much of the 20th century. So it was possible to create a living wage, or for a family to be able to, for a single wage earner, usually a male, to be able to support a family with even a high school education and still have a middle class style of living. Now that's not possible because first of all, the huge change in the role of women, and the fact that the kind of workforce that is required now is a workforce that doesn't generally produce as much, but does intellectual kind of work. And so we have to train everyone for a much higher order level of thinking.
You said something very good about training, because I feel that what we're missing in our country is training teachers. And we do take the teachers out of universities, but they need to be trained after that for at least a year, 2 years in the program, so that they are prepared for teaching these children instead of just sending them out.
It's funny that you said this. Look what I have. Who's teaching the teachers? You didn't even know I had this. And who's teaching these teachers? But because a lot of these teachers are, they said, is ill prepared. They're ill prepared themselves in math and science. And if they're ill prepared and they're teaching our children, that's very sad. In fact, one of the this was a good way to get into this, because in Finland, in order to teach even kindergarten, you have to have a master's degree. And these are highly qualified people, and they pick out the best in the educational system. And one of the things, they pay their teachers very well. And I'm always thinking, in order to have a doctor, in order to have a lawyer, who teaches these? Teachers, right? Why are they? In fact, I was listening to somebody on radio this morning coming into the show. They were talking about the teachers. Some of them are getting paid like $40,000. Now, do your doctors and your attorneys and your dentists, are they getting paid $30,000 and $40,000? No.
Let me respond to that.
They're getting six-figure. Why are they getting? And then the sports figures. I mean, they're paid to play baseball, or in football they're getting millions of dollars. Something isn't right, and the teachers are just making such mediocre salaries. It doesn't make sense. Where the teachers in these other countries, in European countries, are really making a good salary.
And and where that is occurring, and using Finland as an example, you find that there is a premium on the field of education. There is a premium on educating children. Nothing else is seen as more important than educating children. And that's really a personal belief that I have, that children are our greatest resource. And if we do not invest in them, we will all pay a price. And we will all lose in the end. And I don't think we invest in our kids as much as we should. When I take a look at the fact that in Finland, every child goes to preschool, preschool. This is paid for by the government. There is an expectation that from preschool all the way through, that kids will be educated and educated at high levels.
And preschool is extremely important.
Yes,
a lot of
it
people
is.
don't realize is there are a lot of children. I mean, if they're not going to preschool, what are the people they play? What do they do all day?
Right,
Children,
right.
They, they're on the streets. They're they're not being watched. I mean, they're not learning. And I think something that Sylvia mentioned earlier. You're a reading specialist. You had somebody from 3rd grade that you found out that wasn't reading.
Exactly. Reading is so important. I was doing No Child Left Behind in a suburban area, and I was a supervisor, and I was so surprised to find that there was a little boy in the group who couldn't read. And I noted it right away. I called the mother, and I said, I will be happy to tutor this child privately. And I recognized it, and he was able to read on level after 1 year of working with him. And it really...
And you practically did it pro bono, too. You didn't charge very much. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did.
That was very nice of you to do
Well,
that.
thank you.
But really
But
in our society,
yeah.
what we find is that in a lot of instances, those who are able to afford to send their children to preschool programs, then they take advantage of that. We also have...
But you said the magic word just now, afford.
That's right, yes.
Afford.
Yes.
And what about these children that that during the summertime, some of them parents could afford to send them to a nice camp where they may learn different, experiences. And then other parents that can't afford to send these children to camp, and by the time they have these 4-week, 5-week, 6-week vacation, whatever was it, 4 weeks or 6 weeks in the summertime? Do you
Probably
remember?
closer to 8 weeks.
It's
8
closer to
weeks, 8
Yeah.
to 10
It's almost
weeks.
2
Oh,
full
my
months.
God.
Eight
Eight to
to
10.
10.
Yes.
What happens? They come back to school. They can't remember anything. You have to be going over all the
Yes,
plans.
yes,
It's
yes.
just
Review.
reviewing
Right,
all the
right.
time. What Katie, you said something. You're in a high school situation, and you also mentioned you said 3rd grade, but you told me. In high school, some of the kids do not read. I don't
We
get
have-
that. How do they fall through the cracks? How
We
can
have
they not
several
read?
students that struggle in a lot of the basic skills, reading, math, the skills that are important, but I think unfortunately one of the practices that has been way too acceptable in my opinion is the idea of social promotion, that we hold a kid back for so long, but we're just going to promote them to the next grade level even though they're not quite there. Or I think too, there's so many thoughts that have been going through my head as we're talking about this, and we talked about compensating the teachers, or teachers being trained enough. There was a time where teaching people did it, they loved it, they wanted to educate, that was the whole mindset. Unfortunately, when you go into education as a career, you're not compensated as much as you necessarily should be, and for a while there weren't people who wanted to go into that field because of that. And so we had this whole thing of alternative ways to teaching, and they were reaching out and trying to get anyone that they could. And so we brought in all these people into the schools that have no background in education. And it doesn't matter how much you know about a certain subject, you have to have that other aspect. You have to understand the philosophies and the policies of the educational system and how to work with kids. There's other skills you need other than just knowing how to do all the math equations or knowing all the correct grammar and how to teach that. You also have to know other skills, people skills, how to work with children. There's just so many aspects to it. And so you often do see kids that I think teachers get burned out a lot. You see a lot of kids that are slipping through the cracks, and you wonder, even someone being in the education system right now, I question and I wonder how it happens to so many students.
One of the things that, in relating to what you're saying, Katie, what we find is that, in Finland, going back to that country, that because of the value that is placed on education and that that is considered, the highest calling there, that's not necessarily the case here in this country. That we value if people make a decision to go into law or to go into medicine
right,
or to go
right.
into the business world, etc. But we sort of look at education as a second choice, not the first choice, and where we really, that's right, and where we really celebrate and encourage our very best, our highest performers that come from our schools to go into the field of education. We've got to start taking a look at that and what's happening, because even even those who are our best teachers, are really excellent teachers, many times as you talk about the compensation, et cetera, that they receive, they go to districts that are wealthier districts, and they are better compensated, yet the need is greatest in those school districts where we have a lot of poverty, where we have kids who don't have prior experience, we have kids who have not had preschool, we have kids who need someone who really has the heart for doing the work, because having the heart is very important. It's not just about the compensation. It's not just about going in and the skills that you have. But I always tell my staff that the work we do on a daily basis is hard work. It's not for everybody. That you've got to have the heart to do it. You have to have the passion to do it. You've got to love it, because you are trying to overcome a lot of obstacles. I believe that the problems that we see in society, they spill over into the schools. They don't stop, because a child is dealing with an issue at home. That child brings that issue into the school, and then it becomes our issue also, and we have to help him to overcome that.
I agree with you. I think that it's the responsibility of the teacher to recognize all children and recognize children who are above and below the levels, and bring them all, incorporate them all into classroom programs, and thereby, when they are creative, they are using their energy to bring in all children so that everybody is included.
And you said something, I just want to say something. You said something about the teacher. One of the problems that I see also, that tenure should not be automatic. And after so many years, a teacher can be a tenured teacher. And that doesn't mean that because you're a tenured teacher, you have a master's degree, you have, you're competent, you're a competent teacher. And I know the unions have it set up where it's difficult to fire a tenured instructor, and one of the things that I do see, I mean, unions are good. They have their good qualities, but one of the poor qualities I see what a union has is that the last person hired is the first person fired. And I remember listening on television from a woman who she got the Apple Award, and she was top teacher in the whole year. I mean, she was in the system, and she got fired because they needed to downsize, and she was the first one to go. So who was kept in is one of the teachers that were there for years because she had the seniority or the tenure, and the person that was really highly qualified was let go. Now, what do you think of that system? That system would not, we're talking about India, China, Finland, that would not exist if she's not competent, they get rid of the person immediately. What do you feel about the tenure system and the unions? I know you're for the unions, but there are things that there may be something that you are not for.
Well, I think it's not totally black and white. It's not all one way. Unions have historically protected workers' rights. Teachers' unions don't guarantee tenure. What they guarantee is the right to due process, which is a very different thing than a right to a job. It's a right to a process if somebody calls your job into question. And I think without those rights, teachers are historically, the reason that they developed was so that teachers could feel that they could teach and say things in their classroom without fear of being fired because they didn't adhere to some kind of a party line. And so that was a very important kind of protection for people.
But that was then.
That was then.
Yeah. But they didn't move into, like you said, the 21st century. This still sounds like
well,
part of the 20th
I think
century.
that what we're seeing in Wisconsin and what we're seeing all over the country, and even in a certain sense the growth of alternate schools, in this case charter schools and other kinds of schools, is that there needs to be a kind of flexibility, which there hasn't been in the past in unionization. And I think that now, because economic times are different and for all the other reasons, I think that those things have to be renegotiated. If I can be a little bit personal, Katie was just saying that teachers have 5 sick days in her particular charter school. Well, public school teachers have negotiated long and hard so that they have 10 days of vacation. And I'm not saying that, of course, it's students first, but also there are certain quality of living that have been guaranteed, or not guaranteed, they haven't been guaranteed, but they've been negotiated over time. So all of those things have to get balanced. I just heard a report coming here that actually workers in the private sector in, I've forgotten which state it was, but